Hi, I'm Aliyah Aziz, and you're watching AnewZ, and here are the headlines. Romania's Constitutional Court annuls the first round of presidential elections, complicating political landscape in the country. Syrian rebels claim control over additional territories, dealing a blow to government forces. Protests in Georgia over suspended EU accession talks continue for the 9th night. Romania's Constitutional Court annuls the first round of presidential elections, just 2 days ahead of the planned runoff between far-right Călin Georgescu and centrist pro-EU Elena Lasconi. Allegations of external interference and irregularities have prompted a major decision by the country's top court.
Romania's Constitutional Court annulled the results of the November 24th presidential election and cancelled the December 8th runoff. Government body cited the evidence of significant flaws in the electoral process. The court announced that the entire election would need to be rerun, with the government tasked with setting a new date and timeline.
It's quite uncertain, unfortunately. It's uncertain, and we don't know which direction it's going, which scares us and our families.
As you can see, what's happening is pretty serious, especially since the elections were postponed. Or I don't know what's happening, for what reason, I don't know. It's not really good politics, but that's what's happening. Yes, and you should know that from the outside it reflects very badly on us.
The decision followed the declassification of Secret Service documents by Romania's Supreme Council of National Defense, which revealed aggressive hybrid Russian attacks targeting the election. The documents also exposed a network supporting far-right pro-Russian candidate Călin Georgescu, who unexpectedly surged to victory in the first round after polling in single digits. Georgescu's platform included ending Romanian support for Ukraine against Russia's invasion, raising concerns within the EU and NATO. The cancelled second round had been set to pit Georgescu against pro-EU centrist Elena Lasconi.
In Syria, anti-regime armed groups have advanced into the city of Homs. This comes after they took control over the city of Hama on Friday.
Another city taken from the Syrian president Bashar al-Assad. Rebel forces on Friday have advanced into the province of Homs. This comes after rebel armed groups led by Hayat Tahrir al-Sham took over the city of Hama on Thursday. The northern anti-government forces in Syria have made significant progress since the beginning when they took over Aleppo last week. These forces are moving south towards Syria's capital, Damascus, where they aim to overthrow Assad, according to militant leader Abu Muhammad al-Jolani in an interview with CNN. Homs is the third city to fall under the control of the rebel groups. Meanwhile, another city, Daraa, in the southern part of the country, has been overcome by rebel groups on Saturday. Rebel sources say the military agreed to make an orderly withdrawal from the city under a deal giving army officials safe passage to the capital.
From this platform, I call on the Minister of Defense of the regime's government and all of the remnants of the criminal regime's militias to listen to the voice of reason and learn from the fate of the officers and militias who preceded them in Aleppo and Hama, and to defect from this gang that has linked the fate of an entire people to the fate of the members of the ruling family, or else await your own fate.
Iran's foreign minister Abbas Araghchi met with Syrian officials and says he views these rebel groups as a threat to the entire region. Araghchi pledges his support to the Syrian government.
The message of today's tripartite meeting between the interministerial ministers of foreign affairs of Iran, Iraq and Syria was three main messages. The first message is the message of support for the Syrian government and people in their fight against the terrorist groups, which, without doubt, are carrying out these attacks as part of an American Zionist conspiracy. The threats of terrorism in Syria will not be limited to Syria. It is a threat to all neighbors and the entire region. If Syria becomes the shelter for terrorists with the return of ISIS and other terrorist groups, it will create a great threat to the region. And this threat will definitely not be limited to Syria and will accelerate into Syria's neighboring countries such as Iraq, Jordan, and Turkey.
The United States says it's also monitoring the situation in Syria and calls for a de-escalation of the conflict. More than 800 people have been killed since the Islamist-led rebels began their offensive. That's according to the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights.
Syrian President Bashar al-Assad's grip on power continues to weaken as armed groups continue to capture more territory from the government forces. From Tel Aviv, our correspondent Trent Murray has more.
Well, the sheer speed of this HTS-led lightning offensive in Syria has really caught many people in this region by surprise, including here in Israel. We are being told that the top brass from the Israeli Defence Force has been holding situation assessments here at the IDF HQ in Tel Aviv, keeping a very close eye on what is going on and also briefing senior members of the government, including the Defence Minister. Of course, what happens in Syria is of real consequence for Israel, given that they do share a fairly lengthy border. We are being told that the IDF has called up some additional troops to be placed on that border, given the situation, just to be placed on standby for any sort of instability. But I think of real consequence for the Israelis is what Iran does in all of this. They don't want to see Iranian forces up near their border in Syria. We are being told that through back channels they have sent a warning to Tehran not to send forces into Syria and, crucially, not to send weapons in that could be smuggled over to Hezbollah in Lebanon. Now, speaking of Hezbollah, we are tracking earlier today several airstrikes on land border crossings between Lebanon and Syria. The IDF says they were behind that. They hit those crossings, in their view, in order to try and prevent weapons being sent again into Lebanon from Syria. But really, I think for the Israelis, just like many in this region, they are just waiting and watching to see what happens next. Israeli officials have told the Axios news outlet in the US that the sheer speed has really caught them by surprise and that they expected the government forces of Bashar al-Assad to put up a stiffer defence. But according to Israeli intelligence, those forces and those defence lines of Bashar al-Assad's forces are crumbling much faster than they thought. Trent Murray for AnewZ, Tel Aviv.
South Korea President Yoon Suk-yeol faces mounting pressure to step down after attempting to impose martial law. Despite widespread backlash and an upcoming impeachment vote, President Yoon refuses to resign.
Tensions are escalating in South Korea. While thousands demand President Yoon's resignation outside parliament, the president's supporters have staged a rally defending his controversial decision. Pressure is growing on President Yoon to find a way out of the contentious situation as political leaders call for his resignation, including some from his ruling party. If impeached, President Yoon will face a trial in the Constitutional Court, a process that could result in his removal from office, similar to the 2017 impeachment of former President Park Geun-hye. Investigations are also underway into potential charges of insurrection and abuse of power, which carry severe penalties. This crisis began earlier this week when Yoon declared martial law, citing threats from North Korea and anti-state forces. The move was rescinded within 6 hours, following a massive backlash. In a televised address, President Yoon apologized and vowed that there would be no second attempt to impose such measures.
Pro-EU protesters held another rally in Georgia, marking the 9th day of demonstrations. Hundreds of people have gathered in Georgia's parliament again to protest the ruling Georgian Dream Party's decision to suspend talks on joining the European Union. Demonstrators gathered outside the parliament building in the capital, Tbilisi, blocking Rustaveli Avenue before police intervened. They were calling for the resignation of the government in addition to holding new parliamentary elections. The protest erupted after the government decided to halt the EU accession talks, as well as renouncing any funding from the bloc until 2028. Meanwhile, Abkhazia, Georgia's breakaway region, warns about severe economic issues after Russia stopped providing financial aid. Local authorities say remaining funds are being redirected to purchase electricity from Russia. Financial officials warn that salary payments will soon be unfeasible. Abkhazia's economic trouble started in September when Russia halted financial support, citing Abkhazia's failure to align its local laws for deeper integration with Moscow. Abkhazia is a region with a history of geopolitical complexities, and it is now facing new challenges. Shifting demographics, regional tensions, and external influences are reshaping its dynamics. Political analyst Levan Mamaladze discusses the broader impact.
In Abkhazia, the current situation is comprised of several components. Everyone must understand that Abkhazia is governed by clans and clan-based groups. These include the Gudauta clan, the Ochamchira clan, and others. Abkhazia is now entering a very complex period. If a census were conducted, which hasn't been done, it might reveal that a majority of the population is now Armenian. This is yet another distinct group. The Armenian population in Abkhazia has grown significantly since the end of the Karabakh War and Azerbaijan's restoration of its territorial integrity. Many Armenians emigrated to Abkhazia after that. This creates a complicated situation in Abkhazia. The Abkhaz people are reluctant to cede their authority over the use of land to so-called Russian investors. Russia has also realized that this is not an easily governed territory. Historically, we lived together, and we know the Abkhaz people well. Georgia has always taken these nuances into account. I don't want to directly say that what is happening in Georgia is connected to Abkhazia. However, it is related to the fact that Georgia has decided not to play the game the West is proposing to us. All the Maidan-style unrest in Tbilisi, the vandalism and the violence by demonstrators were part of a single plan, a scenario of so-called revolutions. But this will not succeed. The authorities are taking measures. It is deceptive to claim that firing fireworks and pyrotechnics at police is democracy, while police arresting instigators is violence. This is completely wrong and represents the narrative the West is promoting. Therefore, Georgia has decided not to participate in these games. Georgia has chosen not to be exploited. We have seen what happened in Ukraine with Ukrainization. We want peace. The majority of Georgians have chosen to support the strengthening of our sovereignty. That is the process we are currently undergoing. This is interconnected with regional issues, including Abkhazia and South Ossetia. One could say that Georgia has not taken steps against Russia and has not entered into direct confrontation with it, despite Russia's efforts to create tensions with the West. We have not imposed direct sanctions on Russia because they are our neighbors. Although some territories are occupied, we understand the importance of accounting for these nuances. Georgia wants peace and good neighborly relations. In light of these trends, Russia is also considering measures and steps toward reconciliation, resolving conflicts and fostering peace. This would allow Georgia to engage in direct contact with the Abkhaz and Ossetians to address these problems. The focus is not on political solutions yet. That stage must be reached in time. We do not want anyone to use this as an opportunity to provoke new confrontations in Skin Valley or Sukhumi. Thus, the resolution of Abkhazian and other territorial conflicts on our land will proceed within this context. We will see what steps Russia takes. We hope they will not obstruct progress, but instead facilitate it. We have initiated dialogue with the Abkhaz and the Ossetians and hope to finally close these conflicts. Political solutions will mature and come later.
The European Union and South America's Mercosur bloc agreed on a long-delayed free trade deal. The agreement, however, now faces a battle for approval in Europe, where there is a stiff opposition from France. France, the biggest critique of the deal in the EU, has branded it as unacceptable. European farmers have repeatedly protested against the EU-Mercosur deal, and that they say would lead to cheap imports of South American commodities, notably beef, that do not meet the EU's green and food safety standards. Conversely, a group of EU members, including Germany and Spain, say the deal is vital for the bloc as it looks to diversify its trade after the near closure of the Russian market and discomfort about reliance on China. Former German Chancellor Angela Merkel testifies before a parliamentary committee investigating Germany's role in the chaotic 2021 Afghanistan withdrawal.
Germany's involvement in Afghanistan ended abruptly on August 15, 2021, when the Taliban seized Kabul. The German government, including then-Chancellor Angela Merkel, did not anticipate the rapid Taliban takeover, leading to a chaotic evacuation of German citizens and Afghan allies. Since 2022, a Bundestag inquiry has been investigating the mistakes behind the withdrawal, with Merkel as the final witness. The ex-chancellor reiterated that the mission was meant to prevent terrorist attacks from Afghanistan. Angela Merkel acknowledged that foreign governments failed to meet key objectives, such as promoting the rule of law and women's rights. She also pointed to cultural misunderstandings, nepotism and drug trafficking as reasons for the failure. She admitted being initially reluctant to evacuate Afghan development workers, fearing it would signal that Germany was abandoning Afghanistan. Merkel's testimony aligned with her former colleague Helge Braun, who defended the Federal Intelligence Service for underestimating the Taliban's quick takeover. The inquiry is focused on the decision-making process and coordination between German government departments and international partners. Committee Chair Ralf Stegner highlighted the need to question Angela Merkel about United States negotiations under Presidents Donald Trump and Joe Biden, especially concerning the conditions tied to troop withdrawals.
Bedingungen knüpft an den Abzug der Truppen.
Questions will have to be asked about the duty of care towards the local German forces, about the preparations for the evacuation operation, and also about the findings of the Federal Intelligence Service as to whether everything was as it should have been.
Meantime, former United States President Donald Trump continues to criticize the U.S. withdrawal, calling it a calamity. He seeks accountability. The international mission in Afghanistan has carried on for about 2 decades with the U.S. leading the way. Germany was also involved from the start, offering military and humanitarian services. The final report from the German inquiry is expected by the next February.
16 Japan-born crested ibises have joined Beijing Zoo following a month-long quarantine. Let's take a closer look at their arrival and the careful preparations involved in settling them into their new home.
These Japan-born crested ibises, originally sent from China, have completed a month-long quarantine. And now, these 16 descendants of those birds have officially joined Beijing Zoo. The rare birds, classified as a first-class nationally protected species, will now live and breed alongside the zoo's existing population of 23 crested ibises. Mao Yu, with 23 years of experience caring for crested ibises, says that detailed preparations were made for their arrival.
It is a nervous animal. If I go in all of a sudden, it will be scared. When our keepers enter their enclosures, they normally knock on the door first and call out its name or number. The existing 23 crested ibises in Beijing Zoo are all bred by ourselves, so the blood relationship with them is relatively distant. And the new addition of 16 crested ibises returned to Beijing Zoo has added fresh blood.
Once teetering on the brink of extinction, the crested ibis have dwindled to just 7 wild individuals found in 1981 in Yanxiang County, Shaanxi Province, northwest China. Decades of intensive conservation efforts have since brought the global population to over 10,000, marking a significant recovery for this iconic species.
With more and more tourists flocking to China for its beautiful snowy landscapes, the country is expanding its winter tourism offerings to meet growing demand.
As winter approaches, more tourists are rushing to China to experience the stunning snowy landscapes. To meet the growing demand, China has expanded its measures by offering ski resorts, scenic spots, hot springs and hotels, which are the main tourist boost for the winter economy. Data from travel platforms reveals that ski hotels in northern China have seen a 22% increase in bookings year-on-year, putting pressure on resorts to enhance their service.
Our homestay hotel has added a dozen of new snow view rooms of various types. Our supermarket and restaurant are also ready for service.
Northern provinces are leading the charge to boost winter tourism. Ski resorts like Beidao in Jilin expect record-breaking numbers, with tourism revenue projected to reach $75.8 million.
We expect that the Beijing ski resort will receive more than 1 million tourists, with the tourism revenue reaching 550 million yuan.
China's ambitious strategy to expand its ice and snow economy plans to generate around $208.7 billion by 2030.
That's all from us here in Baku for now. Thank you and keep watching AnewZ.